Okay. Well, thank you for joining this presentation about the writing resumes for the Public Health Career Fair. And what we're going to review today are just some of the resume basics and then some things that you can do to make sure that your resume is ready for the career fair. So main purpose of doing the resume for the career fair is to set up a meeting or do follow-up information about possible positions that you're going to find out or hear about at the career fair. And what you want to make sure that you're doing when you're working on the resumes is that you have a resume that has relevant information to whoever it is that you're speaking with. You also too want to have a resume that is easy to read, that can quickly be scanned through, that the reader can move around the document and find the things that they want, and that your document too gives a good overview of your education, your experience, and skills. And the overview is important because you're not entirely sure who's going to look at the document. You're not possibly getting the opportunity to customizing the information for the reader. So giving the broad overview is a really good idea. Part of why it's a good idea to do this too is because your reviewer or anybody that's looking at your resume is only going to be looking at it for between 20 to 25 seconds. And in that time, you want to grab their attention. You want to give them the general information about you that you can, so that you can show with them in that document the information that they're kind of looking for, and knowing that they have a short amount of time when they're doing that initial review. After that, they might go in more in depth, learn more about it, look for more things. But in that quick kind of scan of the document, they're taking a short amount of time. And so part of the other thing you want to remember too is that a shorter page length is probably a good idea. And for most, you'll hear for a career fair that your document should only be 1 page, but I do think 2 pages is fine, especially with it being a virtual career fair where the opportunity for the individual to scroll through a document quickly would be okay. But if you want to work anywhere within that 1 to 2 page kind of range for what you have for your document, I think would be a good idea. Anything that's longer just might require more attention from them and more time for them to go through. And especially in that short amount of time you might be speaking with them, you want to have a shorter document and then follow up with a longer document afterwards. When we think about putting the resumes together, there's 2 formats that you can try. So the chronological format is the one that most people use. It's the most common one. It's more of an emphasis on job titles. And it usually is a good way to show people that have stable work histories or an upper progression of what they've done. Employers usually prefer this style, but what's harder for students using this style is that your most recent experience might not be the most relevant or the most important. An alternative to that is a functional style resume. And this one is more focused on the transferable skills and qualifications that you've gotten. You want to categorize your experiences. You're always including a work history. And then what you can do with this is group together training and experiences that you've gotten that are similar or you want to group together. And a disadvantage of this is that an employer doesn't usually prefer this style. Part of the reason why is they can't figure out where and when you've gained the experience that you're putting on there. So usually employers are less keen on wanting to see this particular style of resume. And then a good compromise for that is a hybrid style, which is just a combination of the 2 resumes. And one of the things I think about this style that works really well for public health students, because it gives a look of a chronological resume, but it allows you the flexibility to showcase and to show off relevant experience you have in the order that you want it to be seen. The disadvantage of this is that if somebody was strictly looking at the dates, there might be gaps of time when it will maybe look like that you're not working, but it really just means that experience is in a different section. So one of the things you want to be aware of in kind of putting together the resume is relevancy. To me, is always more important than having a connected timeline. So any things that you can share, any information you can share you think is relevant, putting it and showcasing it earlier than later is better. So we go through the different parts of the resume. One of the things that we always are recommending students to have is a profile statement. And a profile statement might look something like this, talking about the degree, talking about the skills that someone has, highlighting the degree concentration or something like that might be in there. But this particular kind of format might not be the best for a career fair. So when we think with a career fair, we want to be more concise with our information. We maybe want to take up less space on the page. So one of the things we might want to just recraft that same profile that you've written before with, aspiring public health professionals with strong interest in international health and applied research and lab skills. So some variation of that. So it doesn't have to get into as much detail, but what you're really trying to remember in writing something like this is that, one sentence, that takes up a couple lines a page, couple lines on the page, using some of those keywords. I think it's always a good idea to start with the degree information, but this should be the last thing that you add to your resume. This should be something that you're adding after you format it and design the information the way you want, and that you put in the content that you want, and then use the profile as the way to kind of, put the cherry on top of what it is that you've written. So think about organizing the resume the way that you want, and then adding the profile as the last piece of information, even though it appears at the top. Next, when we talk about education, so this might be a way that you'll see that education is going to be displayed. Degree information, expected dates of graduation, putting some concentration, relevant coursework. If you're doing a certificate, putting GPA. So these are some of the things that would normally appear in a resume and that you would usually always kind of want to share. But this might be a better way to include it for a career fair. And so with the career fair, you'll see there's a lot less information that's being shared, a lot less detail. And part of it too is that you're hoping, later on, you're going to be able to share those details. And so what you're doing with this is that you're actually removing some of the information that's just really unnecessary. So one of the big things you can remove is the school. So they're going to know that you're at this school if they're at this career fair. It's not like you as an applicant that's applying to the job with hundreds of other people. They know that, looking at your resume for the career fair, it's because you're at the career fair. I think adding a certificate that you're doing along with your degree is a good thing to include. It just shows an extra level of customization that you're doing with that. And again, bolding your degree and also putting your date of expected graduation is a good idea as well. The relevant coursework might not be as important here as well in this resume for a career fair, because you're going to be able to explain a little bit more about what it is you've been learning in your classes if you think that would be a good thing to showcase. Another thing you can add to your resume always is a public health training section. And in this public health training section, one of the things that you're doing is you're doing a deeper dive into the coursework that you've done within class. And sometimes that coursework that you've done as one of your classes might be more important than an experience that you may have. So if you're going to be removing some of the relevant course titles, but you have a course in particular you think would be good to showcase, this might be something to kind of look at. But what you're doing with this is also to summarizing more of this information. So maybe you're removing the course titles because those aren't quite as important, but it's the content of what you've done in those classes that would be most important. Maybe you're only going to include 1 or 2 bullet points of information, and then you can get into more details about it. So removing the course titles, the time that you took the classes, but listing the activities that you did in the class, keeping it to 1 to 2 bullets might be good for your public health career fair resume. And then this would be a way that generally you're going to see experience kind of laid out. Position title, date, place, bullet points describing what you've done. And each time for every position, you're going to have as much information as you want to share about what it is that you've done. Well, this might not always be the best way to do it for a public health career fair because you're maybe sometimes limited on space. So this could be a variation of what you could do when writing your resume and putting in experience as part of the public health career or for the public health career fair. So really what you're doing is you're kind of looking at this and saying, well, instead of putting all this detail, I'm only going to choose one of these positions, and that's the one I'm going to have the most detail. And looking at the experiences that you have and trying to shorten up that information, only provide details about the things you think are most relevant, and then provide more details later on during a follow-up or have a more thorough resume that you can send afterward. Sometimes what you just have to do in this experience is not to get into the details, but just give a track record of the different places that you've worked, and then use the conversation that you have with somebody during the career fair as a way to explain a little bit more. Or after you've had a conversation with somebody at the career fair, you'll then know, well, what's important should I highlight? What is more things that I can share? But if you wanted to give someone just a broad overview, well, here are all the experiences I've had. These are the titles, these are the places, these are the dates that these things kind of took place. And then we're talking a little bit about professional development. So, anytime that we talk about professional development, we see this as a a catch-all skill section area. So it could be language skills, computer skills, membership, volunteer activities, trainings, non-academic certification. So all this can kind of go in there, but this might take up a little too much space in your document. And so this might be a better, more concise way to present that information. And maybe you're only highlighting certain things. You're only putting, 2 language skills that you have that are fluent. You're only putting the technical skills that you think are important to include for this particular job, or this particular, organization or anything like that. So you just want to be more selective of the things you're including in there. And by including those things in there, you're going to focus on those things that you think are most important or most impressive. So if you did want to convert your resume to a one-page resume, one of the things you want to kind of look at is say, where are the places where I can minimize and share less information? So I always still think having a profile would be a good idea. So write this as a summary of information that is going to appear, that's going to showcase what's going to appear in the rest of the resume. Under the education, you're just going to put your degree titles. Again, remove relevant coursework in the school because they're going to know what school that it's from. And then putting your GPA as your personal choice. It doesn't have to be there. And I don't think that it has to be something that's going to be a determining factor for an employer. But if you want to include it, by all means, include it. If you're going to include it for one degree, you should include it for all. So include it for your master's degree and any bachelor's degree, or include it for your PhD, master's, and undergraduate degree as well. Again, if you want to have that public health training section, that certainly would have the space in there. You're just going to kind of summarize the overall training that you've gotten, but it's not necessary to be included. And then when you go to experience, one of the things you're going to look at is, only include bullet points for positions that you think are most relevant, or if it's a relevant and current position, that's where you want to add the bullet points. That's what employers are usually looking for. They're looking to see what is it you have that would be very relevant. And you might have a track record of experience in different places, but the most recent one is going to be the one that's the most advanced, is going to be the one that showcases your skills. So you also too, with experience, you don't have to have just one section of experience. You can divide up your experience. You can label and group together different types of experience. So if you think you have 2 distinct levels of experience, 2 distinct places that you've gotten your experience from, by all means, separate those 2 things out, put them into 2 different labeled sections as well. And then consolidating and condensing your professional development section. So only include the things you think are the most relevant, only have the things that are more towards language skill or computer skill or technical skill or a volunteer activity that you think is very relevant. Again, this professional development is a catch-all, so it can be anything. So if there's anything else you'd want to include, anything that doesn't quite fit in experience, doesn't quite fit into education, this would be the section to include that. And then again, if you're looking to make this more of a one-page document, you could add publications if you have the room. You could put select publications if you wanted to add just one publication in there and then say, more available upon request. And then you can always adjust your margins to fill the page and maximize all the white space on the page. So generally, if you think about most documents have a 1-inch margin all the way around. If you want a 1/2-inch margin all the way around, how would that look, on the document? Do you want to adjust the font size and get things to fit differently? Make your document easy to read, but also too, don't feel like it's, you want to make everything microscopic. You still want to make the document easy to read, easy to kind of go through. But changing the margins is one thing that's formatting that you can do and try to play around with to see if you can get different things to fit properly, but still not look too crowded on the page. All right. So if we think about the best suggestions of things to include in your resume, you really want to think about education as your biggest selling piece. Your education is what you're doing to advance yourself in the field that you want to go into. So don't be afraid to highlight that information. Don't be afraid to share a little bit more with it. Making sure too that education should be one of the top things you include in your resume. Professional development is that catch-all, that kind of place where you can kind of put everything. Try the best you can to make your resume easy to scan over very quickly. Again, the person that you're talking to and you're sharing this with, they might only be looking at the document while they're, talking with you at the same time. So just giving them kind of attention of where you want them to kind of look for certain things, and then you can explain more about what you've done there. You should proofread this document and then give it to somebody else who knows nothing about public health, so they can proofread it again to make sure you haven't missed anything, making sure you haven't spelled anything wrong. Make sure you spell Johns Hopkins with the S in Johns. Putting a John Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is usually not a good idea. Those mistakes in the proofreading or the grammar, those are almost little red flags that pop up for employers to say, do you have attention to detail? So you don't want to give them any reason to second guess whether you have good attention to detail. Again, talking about the font size, anything between 10, 11, and 12 would be good to use on the page. Try to avoid any fancy fonts. There's no real need for colors or pictures in your document. Just having the information about you is all that they really kind of need. With that said, you can certainly use resume templates for this information and put things in certain ways. I will say this is your resume. These are all suggestions about what to do. This is not to say this is how it has to be. We don't have a standardized way to do it, but we can certainly give you suggestions of what we think would work well. And then finally, making sure that you're taking your document, converting it to a PDF. So the Word version that you might work in, or the one you might work on your Google Drive, or your Google Doc, I'm sorry, might not be, may not always show up and look the way that you want it to look. So if you can convert it to a PDF so the document looks the way you want, then it makes it easy to use and easy to look at on multiple different types of devices. So with that, I want to say, good luck with the career fair. Feel free to, ask us questions after the career fair to connect with any employers. And if you have any other things that our office can help you out with, please let us know. Thanks a lot.